The gunshot echoed across the dusty main street of Green River, Wyoming, but Josephine Vance didn't flinch. At 42, she'd heard enough gunfire in her life to know this was just another drunken cowboy shooting at the sky. The year was 1886, and she was too old and too tired to be startled by such things anymore. The belongings of her former life were packed into two worn leather trunks beside her as she stood outside the stage-coach office, wondering if she'd made the biggest mistake of her already mistake-riddled life. "Madam, you planning on standing there all day?" The stage-coach driver called down to her from his perch. "Sun's getting high and we've got a schedule to keep." "I'm staying," Josephine said, her voice steadier than she felt. "These trunks are coming off." The driver shrugged, hopped down, and with the help of a young boy who appeared from nowhere, unloaded her possessions onto the boardwalk. Dust swirled around her ankles as she paid him, trying not to count how few dollars remained in her purse afterward. Green River wasn't much to look at, a collection of wooden buildings strung along a wide dirt main street, with the railroad tracks cutting through on the north side and the actual Green River flowing beyond. It was smaller than Denver, where she'd come from, but larger than she'd expected for a Wyoming town that barely showed on the maps. She'd come here on nothing more than a letter from an old friend promising work at the town's hotel. It was reckless at her age, but desperation had a way of making even the most cautious woman take risks. "You need some help with those, madam," the voice came from behind her, deep and graveled like stones in a creek bed. Josephine turned to find herself looking at a tall man with shoulders that seemed to fill the street. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes were startlingly blue beneath the brim of his worn Stetson. Not young, perhaps in his mid-40s, but strong in a way that made her suddenly conscious of how she must look after 3 days of travel. "I'm fine, thank you," she said automatically, though the trunks were clearly too heavy for her to manage alone. He smiled, revealing a small gap between his front teeth that gave his otherwise rugged face an unexpected charm. "I'm sure you are, madam, but those trunks look mighty heavy, and I happen to be heading in whichever direction you're going." Despite herself, Josephine smiled. "And how would you know that, sir, when I haven't yet told you where I'm headed?" "Owen Calloway," he said, tipping his hat instead of answering her question. "Most folks around here just call me Cal." "Josephine Vance," she replied. "I'm looking for the River's Edge Hotel. I'm to work there." "Then we're going the same way after all. I've got the livery stable just past the hotel." He bent and picked up both trunks with an ease that made her previous struggles seem ridiculous. "New in town, then? Just arrived," she admitted, falling into step beside him. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to those of us who have been here a while," he said. "Green River's not big enough to miss a new face, especially one like yours." Josephine felt heat rise to her cheeks and turned her face slightly away. It had been years since a man had paid her even the mildest compliment, and she wasn't sure how to respond. "The River's Edge is decent enough," Owen continued, seemingly unaware of her discomfort. "Martha Holliday runs it tight but fair. She a friend of yours?" "We knew each other in St. Louis years ago. She wrote that she needed help after her husband passed." They walked in companionable silence for a moment, the sounds of the town horses, distant hammering, conversations drifting from open doors filling the space between them. "What brings a woman like you to a place like Green River?" Owen asked finally. "If you don't mind my asking." Josephine considered how to answer. The full truth was too complicated and too painful to share with a stranger, no matter how helpful. "A new beginning," she said simply. "Or at least an attempt at one. Beginnings are good," he said, nodding as if she'd said something profound. "This town's seen its share of people looking for those." The River's Edge Hotel came into view, a 2-story wooden structure with a wide porch and freshly painted sign. It wasn't grand, but it was well maintained, which spoke well of Martha's management. "Here we are," Owen said, setting her trunks down on the porch. "Martha's probably in the back office." "Thank you for your help, Mr. Calloway." "Cal," he corrected. "And it was my pleasure, Miss Vance." "Mrs.," she said automatically, then caught herself. "Though I suppose it's Miss now, widowed." The word still felt strange on her tongue. Even 2 years later, something flashed in his eyes, understanding, perhaps. My condolences. Thank you. She searched for something else to say, suddenly reluctant to end the conversation. Your livery stable is it yours alone? Been mine for 12 years now, he said, a note of pride in his voice. Started with 3 stalls and a leaky roof. Now it's the only place between Rawlins and Salt Lake City where you can get a horse properly shod on short notice. Impressive, she said, and meant it. Not really, but it's honest work. He glanced down the street. I should get back. Horses don't feed themselves. Of course. She extended her hand, surprising herself with the gesture. Thank you again. His hand engulfed hers, calloused but gentle. Welcome to Green River, Miss Vance. I hope you find what you're looking for here. As he walked away, Josephine realized she was smiling. It felt unfamiliar on her face, like a dress she hadn't worn in years. The door of the hotel opened behind her, and a familiar voice called out, Josie Vance, as I live and breathe, you actually came. Martha Holliday hadn't changed much in 15 years, still plump, with shrewd eyes and a practical manner that brooked no nonsense. Her hair had gone gray, but her smile was the same as she embraced Josephine. Come in, Martha urged, motioning to a young man to bring in the trunks. You must be exhausted. The room's all ready for you, and we can talk business tomorrow after you've rested. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, washstand, and a window overlooking the main street. Josephine sank onto the bed, suddenly overcome with fatigue and the enormity of what she'd done leaving Denver and the remnants of her old life to start anew in this frontier town. I'm too old for this, she whispered to herself as Martha left her to unpack. Too old to be starting over at 42. But as she unpacked her few good dresses and the small leather-bound journal that contained all her hopes and secrets, Josephine's eyes were drawn to the window. In the street below, Owen Calloway was walking toward his livery, his stride confident and unhurried. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, tipped his hat, and continued on his way. Perhaps, she thought, Green River would be different from what she'd left behind. Perhaps here, the past could stay where it belonged. Morning came too soon, with sunlight streaming through the thin curtains and the sounds of the town already in full swing. Josephine dressed carefully in her best working dress, navy blue with a white collar, severe but respectable, and pinned her dark hair, streaked with gray, into a tight bun. Martha was waiting in the small dining room with coffee and biscuits. You look better this morning, she said, pouring a cup for Josephine. Sleep well, better than I expected, Josephine admitted, taking a seat. Now tell me about this position. Your letter wasn't specific. I need someone to manage the front desk and bookkeeping, Martha explained. Since Henry died, I've been doing it all myself, but with the railroad bringing more travelers through, it's becoming too much. You always did have a head for numbers. And the pay? Josephine asked directly. Friendship was well and good, but she needed to live. Martha named a sum that was modest but fair, with room and board included. Not a fortune, but you'll not go hungry, and Green River's a growing town, opportunities for a woman with sense. I'll take it, Josephine said without hesitation. Her alternatives were limited, and Martha was offering her something precious, a chance to rebuild. After breakfast, Martha showed her the hotel's operations, the register, the system for room assignments, the bookkeeping ledgers that needed updating. It was straightforward work, the kind Josephine could do in her sleep. I'll leave you to get acquainted with the ledgers, Martha said. I need to check on a delivery at the back. Holler if you need anything. Left alone at the front desk, Josephine began reviewing the books. They were in reasonable order, though she immediately saw ways to improve the system. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't notice the man approaching until his shadow fell across the desk. Morning, Miss Vance. Settling in? Owen Calloway stood before her, hat in hand. In the daylight, she could see the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples and the fine lines at the corners of his eyes. Mr. Calloway, she said, setting down her pencil. Yes, thank you. Martha has been very welcoming. Glad to hear it. He seemed about to say more when the door opened behind him, admitting a portly man in a suit too fine for the dusty street. Cal, just the man I was looking for, the newcomer boomed. Got a message from Rollins about those horses you're holding for the army. Owen turned. Mayor Bradley, this is Miss Josephine Vance, newly arrived from Denver. She's helping Martha with the hotel. Miss Vance, Mayor Elijah Bradley. The mayor tipped his hat. Welcome to Green River, madam. Any friend of Martha's is a friend of ours. He turned back to Owen. Can you stop by my office later? There's some paperwork needs sorting. Will do, Owen agreed, and the mayor departed as abruptly as he'd arrived. He seems efficient, Josephine commented. Owen chuckled. Illy's a good mayor, especially for a former card sharp. Knows everyone's business, but mostly keeps it to himself. He hesitated. I actually came by to see if you might want a tour of the town once you're free. Green River's not large, but it helps to know what's where. The offer caught her off guard. That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose on your time. No imposition, he assured her. I've got business all over town today anyway. Could meet you here around 4 if that suits. Josephine found herself nodding before she'd fully considered the implications. 4 would be fine, thank you. His smile warmed his entire face. Until then, Miss Vance. After he left, Martha returned, eyebrows raised. I see you've met Cal again. He offered to show me around town, Josephine explained, trying to sound casual, since I'm new. Was all Martha said, but her knowing expression made Josephine uncomfortable. It's nothing, Martha, just a neighborly gesture. Of course it is, Martha agreed too readily. Cal's always been neighborly, especially to new folks, especially to new women. Josephine felt her cheeks warm. I'm hardly the kind of woman to catch a man's eye these days. Martha's laugh was genuine. Josie, for a smart woman, you can be remarkably blind. You're still a fine-looking woman, and Cal Calloway has been a widower for 8 years now. The whole town's been trying to match him up, but he's particular. Well, he needn't be particular about me, Josephine said firmly. I didn't come to Green River looking for a husband. What did you come looking for then? Martha asked, her tone gentler now. Josephine turned back to the ledgers. Peace, Martha, just a little peace. Martha squeezed her shoulder. Well, you might find that here, and maybe something else too if you're open to it. The afternoon passed quickly as Josephine familiarized herself with the hotel's operations. At 3:45, she found herself checking her appearance in the small mirror behind the desk and pinching color into her cheeks, a habit from her youth that she thought she'd long outgrown. Owen arrived precisely at 4, and something in Josephine's chest tightened at the sight of him. He'd changed into a clean shirt, and his hair was damp as if freshly washed. Ready? He asked. Let me just tell Martha I'm going, she said, slipping into the back office where Martha was sorting linens. Go on, Martha said with a smile. Take your time. First impressions of a place are important. Outside, the afternoon sun bathed Green River in golden light, softening its rough edges. Owen guided her down the main street, pointing out the essential establishments, the general store, the bank, the doctor's office, the small church. And this, he said as they reached the end of the street, is my place. The livery stable was larger than Josephine had expected, well-built and organized. The scent of hay and horses greeted them as they entered, along with the soft nickering of the animals. It's impressive, she said genuinely. You've clearly put a lot of work into it. It's been my life for a dozen years, he admitted, showing her the stalls, the smithy where he shod horses, the small office where he kept his own books. Not as fancy as some, but we do honest work. My son, James, helps when he's not in school. He's 16 now, nearly a man. There was unmistakable pride in his voice. He's with his aunt today over in Rollins. My late wife's sister takes him sometimes, thinks he needs a woman's influence. She's probably right, Josephine said. Boys that age need guidance. You have children? Owen asked, leading her back outside and toward the river that gave the town its name. A daughter, Emily. The familiar ache returned whenever she spoke of her child. She's 23 now, married with a little one of her own in Denver. That makes you a grandmother, he sounded surprised. For 2 years now, she confirmed. Little Thomas is the light of my life. It was hard to leave them, he observed, not a question but a statement of understanding. Josephine nodded, not trusting her voice. They walked in silence along the riverbank for a moment. Why did you? he finally asked. Leave them, I mean. The question was direct, but his tone held no judgment, only curiosity. Josephine sighed. After my husband died, I lived with Emily and her husband. It was difficult. Robert, my son-in-law, is a good man, but the house was small and I felt in the way. When Martha wrote about needing help, it seemed like a sign. That took courage, Owen said quietly. Starting over isn't easy at any age. I'm too old for courage, she said with a small laugh. Too old to be starting again from nothing. Age has nothing to do with it, Owen disagreed, stopping to face her. Some people never find the courage to change their circumstances, no matter how young they are. They had reached a bend in the river where the water pooled deep and clear. The setting sun turned the surface to molten gold. This is my favorite spot in town, Owen said. Peaceful? It's beautiful, Josephine agreed, feeling the tension of the day begin to dissolve. You know, Owen said after a moment, when Sarah, my wife, died, I thought everything worth living for had gone with her. Except James, of course. But the idea of building anything new seemed impossible. Josephine glanced at him, surprised by the personal revelation. What changed? She asked. Time, mostly, he admitted. And realizing that Sarah would have hated seeing me half alive, she was always full of plans, always looking ahead. He skipped a stone across the water. Eventually, I figured out that starting over doesn't dishonor what came before, it just means you're still living. The simple truth of his words struck Josephine deeply. That's a good way to think of it. Besides, he added with a slight smile, we're not that old, you and I, got a lot of years left, God willing, might as well make something of them. Is that what you've done, made something of them? Trying to, he said. The livery's doing well, James is growing up strong, I've made a place for us here. He looked at her directly. But there's still something missing. I think you might understand that. Josephine felt her heart quicken, and it wasn't entirely comfortable. This man was a stranger, yet something about him made her want to lower the carefully constructed walls she'd built around herself. We should head back, she said instead of addressing his implicit question. Martha will be wondering where I've gone. If Owen was disappointed by her retreat, he didn't show it. Of course, it's getting late. The walk back to town was quieter, each lost in their own thoughts. As they approached the hotel, Josephine felt a strange reluctance to end their time together. Thank you for the tour, she said formally as they reached the porch. You were very kind to take the time. My pleasure, Owen replied. Perhaps you'll join me for dinner sometime. The cafe down the street makes a decent steak. The invitation hung between them, weighted with possibilities that both attracted and frightened her. Perhaps, she said, non-committal. Good night, Mr. Calloway. Cal, he reminded her gently. Good night, Josephine. As she watched him walk away, Josephine realized he'd used her given name for the first time. Stranger still, she hadn't minded. Days passed into weeks as Josephine settled into life in Green River. The work at the hotel suited her, and she found satisfaction in bringing order to Martha's somewhat chaotic bookkeeping system. The guests were mostly travelers passing through drummers selling their wares, families moving west, the occasional wealthy tourist on their way to Yellowstone. She saw Owen regularly, as his livery was just down the street. Sometimes he would stop by the hotel on some pretext, and they would exchange a few words. Once or twice, she accepted his invitation to walk by the river in the evening. They talked about safe topics, the weather, town gossip, books they had read. He told her about his son James, who she eventually met when he came to the hotel to deliver a message from his father. James Calloway was tall like his father, but slender, with a serious face that occasionally broke into his father's same gap-toothed smile. He treated Josephine with a shy politeness that endeared him to her immediately. Pa talks about you, he said one day when he came to fix a loose railing on the hotel porch. Does he? Josephine tried to sound merely curious. James nodded, hammering a nail with precision. Says you're smart and pretty. He blushed slightly. Though that part I figured out myself, madam. Josephine laughed, charmed by his adolescent gallantry. You're very kind, James, and very much your father's son. That's what everyone says, he agreed. Though Pa says I got my mother's sense and her way with horses. She could calm even the wildest stallion, he says. Your mother sounds like she was a remarkable woman. James' face grew thoughtful. I was only 8 when she died, don't remember as much as I wish I did. He hesitated. Pa's been alone a long time, he doesn't say it, but I know he gets lonely. Josephine felt a twinge of discomfort at the conversation's turn. Your father seems quite content with his life and his work, and he has you. It's not the same, James said with the certainty of youth. A man needs a wife. And does your father share this opinion? Josephine asked, trying to keep her tone light. James shrugged. He doesn't talk about it much, but I've seen how he looks at you. Before Josephine could respond to this alarming statement, the door opened behind them and Martha emerged. James Calloway, are you bothering my manager with your chatter when there's work to be done? She asked, though her tone was affectionate. No, madam, James replied, quickly returning to his task. Just keeping Miss Vance company while I work. Well, Josephine has ledgers to balance, don't you, dear? Martha gave her a meaningful look. Yes, of course, Josephine agreed, grateful for the escape. Thank you for fixing the railing, James. As she retreated inside, Josephine's mind was in turmoil. James' innocent observations had forced her to confront something she'd been avoiding, the growing attraction between her and Owen, and the possibility that it might lead somewhere. That evening, after the hotel quieted for the night, Martha found her sitting alone in the small parlor, staring at an open book she wasn't reading. Penny for your thoughts, Martha said, settling into the chair across from her. Josephine closed the book. They're hardly worth that much. They're about Cal Calloway, aren't they? Martha's directness had always been both her most admirable and most irritating quality. James said something today that unsettled me, Josephine admitted. About his father's regard for me, and that surprises you, Martha asked. The man finds excuses to walk past the hotel 3 times a day just on the chance you might be on the porch. I'm not looking for a husband, Martha. Who said anything about a husband? Maybe you just need a friend or something else. Martha's eyes twinkled mischievously. Martha Holliday. Josephine exclaimed, scandalized. Oh, don't play the proper widow with me, Josie Vance. We've known each other too long. Martha leaned forward. What are you really afraid of? Josephine sighed, the fight going out of her. Everything, failing, succeeding. Caring for someone and losing them again, being hurt, hurting others. She looked at her hands, the skin no longer as smooth as it once was. And yes, I'm afraid of being too old for any of it to matter anymore. Nonsense, Martha said firmly. You're 42, not 82. And Cal is a good man, steady, honest, kind. The town respects him. It's too soon, Josephine protested weakly. It's been 2 years since Daniel died, Martha pointed out gently. And longer since you truly felt married, if I recall your letters correctly. Josephine couldn't deny that. The last years of her marriage had been difficult, as Daniel's business failures and subsequent drinking had strained their relationship to breaking. His death from pneumonia had been a shock, but also, if she was brutally honest with herself, a kind of release. Just don't close the door before you've even looked inside the room, Martha advised, rising. That's all I'm saying. The next morning, Josephine was at the front desk when the door burst open and a breathless boy of about 10 rushed in. Miss Vance, he gasped. Mr. Calloway sent me. There's been an accident at the livery. He says, can you come quick? Josephine's heart lurched. What kind of accident? Is someone hurt? It's James, the boy said. Horse kicked him bad, doc's there, but Mr. Calloway asked for you special. Without hesitation, Josephine grabbed her shawl. Martha, she called toward the back. Emergency at the livery, I'm going. She followed the boy at a near run, her mind racing with terrible possibilities. The livery was in chaos when they arrived, several men standing around looking grim, the doctor's buggy outside, and the sound of someone in pain coming from inside. Owen met her at the door, his face ashen. Josephine, thank God it's James. Stallion we were breaking kicked him in the chest. Doc says. His voice broke. Josephine took his arm. Take me to him. James lay on a cot in Owen's office, his face gray with pain. Dr. Walsh, a grizzled man in his 60s, was examining him with gentle hands. James' breathing was labored, and blood stained the bandages wrapped around his chest. Pa, James called weakly as they entered. I'm here, son, Owen said, kneeling beside him. And I brought Miss Vance like you asked. James turned his head slightly, his eyes finding Josephine. Miss Vance, sorry to trouble you. No trouble at all, she said, moving to his other side and taking his hand. It felt cold and too small in hers. You just rest and let Dr. Walsh take care of you. Dr. Walsh beckoned Owen outside. Josephine made to follow, but James held onto her hand. Stay, he asked, his voice barely audible. Please. Of course, she assured him, sitting on the edge of the cot. I'm scared, he admitted, and in that moment he looked much younger than his 16 years. I know, she said, stroking his forehead, but you're strong like your father, you'll be fine if I'm not. He began. Hush, she interrupted, no talk like that. But if I'm not, he persisted, promise you'll look after Pa, he'll need someone. Josephine felt tears sting her eyes. You'll be looking after him yourself, James Calloway, but yes, I promise. He seemed satisfied with that and closed his eyes. Josephine continued to stroke his forehead, humming softly an old lullaby she used to sing to Emily. She was so focused on James that she didn't hear Owen return until he spoke. He's sleeping, he asked quietly. Just resting, I think, she replied, looking up at him. What did the doctor say? Owen's face was a mask of control about to shatter. 3 broken ribs, 1 punctured his lung, internal bleeding, he says. He swallowed hard. He says to prepare myself. No, Josephine said fiercely. No, Owen, James is young and strong, he'll fight. Owen nodded, but his eyes were hollow with fear. Doc's gone for more supplies, said to keep him still and comfortable. Josephine moved aside so Owen could sit beside his son. I'll wait outside. No, both Calloways said together, James' eyes flying open. Stay, Owen echoed his son's earlier request. Please, Josephine, I can't. She understood. He couldn't face this alone. I'll stay, she promised. The hours that followed were among the longest of Josephine's life. Doctor. Walsh returned with more bandages and medicines, redressed James' wounds, and gave him laudanum for the pain. The boy drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes delirious with fever. Owen never left his side, and neither did Josephine. She sent word to Martha explaining her absence, then settled in for the vigil. As night fell, the livery grew quiet, with only the occasional soft nickering of horses to break the silence. You should rest, Owen told her around midnight. There's a cot in the back room. I'm fine, she insisted, though her back ached from sitting so long. How about you? You look exhausted. I can't leave him, Owen said simply. Then I can't leave either of you, she replied with equal simplicity. Their eyes met across James' sleeping form, and something passed between them, understanding, gratitude, and something deeper that neither was ready to name. Dawn was breaking when James' fever finally broke. Doctor. Walsh, who had returned to check on him, pronounced it a good sign, though he warned they weren't out of danger yet. The next 24 hours will tell, he said, but he's fighting hard. He's his mother's son, Owen said, his voice rough with exhaustion and emotion. And his father's, Josephine added quietly, after the doctor left, promising to return by noon. Owen finally allowed himself to close his eyes, slumping in his chair beside James' cot. Josephine draped her shawl over his shoulders and went outside for a breath of fresh air. The town was just waking up, the early morning light painting the buildings in soft gold. Josephine leaned against the livery wall, suddenly overwhelmed by the night's events and what they revealed about her own feelings. She had known Owen Calloway barely 2 months, yet the thought of him facing his son's injury or worse alone was unbearable to her. Miss Vance. She turned to find Martha approaching, a basket in her hands. I brought breakfast, Martha said. Figured nobody had thought about food. How is the boy? Better, the doctor thinks, Josephine said, accepting the basket gratefully. The fever broke an hour ago. Thank God for that, Martha said. And how is Cal holding up? As well as can be expected. He's finally sleeping. Martha studied her friend's face. And you? You look done in, Josie. I'm fine, Josephine insisted, though she felt anything but just tired. Martha didn't look convinced. You care for them, both of them. It wasn't a question, but Josephine answered anyway. Yes, I do. Good, Martha said simply. About time you admitted it to yourself. Before Josephine could respond, the livery door opened, and Owen emerged, looking rumpled and weary but less desperate than before. "Thought I heard voices," he said. "Martha, this is kind of you. Least I could do," Martha replied. "James is a good boy. The whole town's pulling for him." "Thank you," Owen said, "and thank you for sparing Josephine. I don't know what we would have done without her." The way he looked at Josephine when he said it made her heart skip, and Martha didn't miss it. "Well, I should get back to the hotel," Martha said. "Josie, take the day. I can manage." After Martha left, Owen and Josephine shared a simple breakfast of bread, cheese, and coffee while taking turns sitting with James, who continued to sleep peacefully. "You must be exhausted," Owen said as they sat together during one of these breaks. "You've been here all night. So have you," she pointed out. "He's my son, and you're my—" She hesitated, unsure how to define what he was to her. "Friend," he suggested, watching her carefully. "Yes," she agreed, though the words seemed inadequate. "Friend." Owen reached across the small table and took her hand. His was warm and rough with calluses. "Josephine, when I sent for you yesterday, it wasn't just because James asked for you. It was because you were the person I needed most in that moment." The simple honesty of his statement took her breath away. "Owen, you don't have to say anything," he assured her. "I know this isn't the time or place, but nearly losing James made me realize how quickly life can change, how important it is to speak the truth while you can." He squeezed her hand gently. "And the truth is, you've become very important to me." Josephine felt tears threaten again. "And you to me," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm afraid, Owen, I'm too old to start again, to risk my heart." "You're not too old," he said with quiet certainty. "And neither am I. We'll start together if you're willing, when you're ready, no rush." Before she could respond, a weak voice called from the other room, "Pa, Miss Vance." They both rose immediately, still holding hands as they went to James' side. James' recovery was slow but steady. After that first critical day and night, he began to improve, his youth and natural strength working in his favor. Dr. Walsh visited daily, gradually becoming more optimistic about his prognosis. "He'll need to rest for at least a month," the doctor advised Owen a week after the accident. "No strenuous activity, but I believe the worst is behind us." Josephine had returned to her duties at the hotel but spent every evening at the livery, bringing dinner for Owen and James, reading to the boy, and sometimes just sitting in companionable silence with Owen after James fell asleep. They didn't speak again of Owen's declaration, but it hung between them, changing the quality of their silences and the meaning behind their everyday interactions. Josephine found herself thinking of him constantly, imagining a future she had thought forever closed to her. 2 weeks after the accident, James was well enough to sit up and even take short walks around the livery with support. Josephine arrived one evening to find him sitting outside on a bench, enjoying the late summer air. "Look at you," she exclaimed, genuinely pleased. "Up and about already." "Doc says I'm healing faster than expected," James said proudly. "Pa's just gone to the general store for supplies, said to tell you he'll be right back." Josephine sat beside him. "How are you feeling, truly?" "Better every day," he assured her. "Still hurts to breathe deep, but not like before." He glanced at her sideways. "Thanks for being here for Pa and for me." "I wouldn't have been anywhere else," she said honestly. James nodded, as if confirming something to himself. "Miss Vance, can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask," she said cautiously. "I might not answer." "Fair enough." He took a careful breath. "Do you care for my father? I mean more than just as a friend." Josephine was startled by his directness. "James, that's a very personal question indeed." "I know," he admitted, "but I almost died makes a person not want to waste time." He looked at her directly, suddenly seeming older than his years. "I see how he looks at you, and how you look at him when you think no one's watching." Josephine felt her face warm. "Your father and I are friends, good friends." "He deserves to be happy," James said. "So do you, I reckon." "It's complicated, James." "Doesn't seem complicated to me," he said with a shrug that made him wince slightly. "Two people who like each other a whole lot. What's complicated about that?" Josephine couldn't help smiling at his youthful simplification. "When you're older, you'll understand that adult relationships have many layers." "Maybe," he conceded. Or maybe adults just make things harder than they need to be. Before Josephine could respond to this philosophical observation, Owen returned, carrying a package from the store. His face brightened at the sight of her, confirming everything James had just said. "Josephine, didn't expect you so early," he said. "Martha had everything under control, so I closed the books for the day," she explained, rising to help him with his package. "I brought stew and fresh bread." "You're spoiling us," Owen said, his smile warming her more than the summer evening. "James and I were just having an interesting conversation," Josephine said, giving the boy a meaningful look. "Oh," Owen glanced between them curiously. "About how adults complicate things," James said with innocent mischief. "Isn't that right, Miss Vance?" "Something like that," she agreed, unable to be upset with him. "Now, shall we eat while the stew is hot?" Later, after James had gone to bed in the small room behind the office, Josephine and Owen sat outside, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. "What were you and James really talking about?" Owen asked eventually. Josephine hesitated. "He asked me a very direct question about my feelings for you." "Ah," Owen seemed unsurprised. "And what did you tell him? That we're friends, good friends." "I see." There was a note of disappointment in his voice that he couldn't quite hide. Josephine gathered her courage. "But I didn't tell him that I've been thinking about what you said, about starting together." Owen turned to face her, his expression suddenly intent. "And have you reached any conclusions?" "Only that I'm terrified," she admitted. "But also that I haven't felt so alive in years as I do when I'm with you." Owen reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "Josephine, I know it hasn't been long, and I know you came here looking for peace, not whatever this is between us, but I care for you deeply. More than I thought possible after Sarah." "I care for you too," she whispered, the admission feeling like stepping off a cliff. "Then that's enough for now," he said. "We can take our time, no need to rush." In the soft darkness, Josephine found the courage to ask the question that had been haunting her. "What if it doesn't work? What if we try and fail?" "Then we fail," he said simply. "But we'll have tried. Isn't that better than wondering for the rest of our lives?" Put that way, it seemed so clear. Josephine thought of all the years she had spent in a marriage that had slowly died, of the safety she had sought in Green River, of the unexpected joy she had found instead. "When you put it that way," she said slowly, "I find it hard to argue." Owen's laugh was soft in the darkness. "Good, I was afraid you'd find a dozen reasons why we shouldn't even try." "Oh, I have a dozen reasons," she assured him. "Maybe more, but I'm beginning to think they don't matter as much as this." She squeezed his hand gently. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, hands linked, watching the stars brighten above them. "May I call on you properly?" Owen asked eventually. "When James is a bit stronger, I'd like to take you to dinner at the hotel, as a guest, not the manager." Josephine smiled, feeling oddly shy. "I'd like that." As summer turned to fall, James continued to recover, gradually taking on light duties at the livery again. Josephine divided her time between the hotel and helping Owen, who had fallen behind in his work during his son's illness. She discovered she had a knack for bookkeeping that extended beyond the hotel's ledgers, and soon she was helping to organize the livery's accounts as well. True to his word, Owen began courting her properly dinners at the hotel dining room, walks by the river, even a church picnic where the whole town could see his intentions. There was some gossip, of course, but most of Green River seemed pleased to see the respected liveryman and the hotel manager finding happiness together. Martha was smugly satisfied with the development. "Told you he had his eye on you from the start," she reminded Josephine one evening as they closed up the hotel. "Just needed a little push, both of you." "I wish you wouldn't look so pleased with yourself," Josephine said, though she couldn't help smiling. "Anyone would think you planned the whole thing." "Not James getting hurt, obviously," Martha clarified, "but the rest. Maybe I did right to you knowing Calloway was the finest unmarried man in 3 counties. "Martha Holliday," Josephine exclaimed. "You didn't." "Well, not entirely," Martha admitted. "I really did need help with the hotel, but I might have had a secondary motive." Josephine shook her head, unable to be truly annoyed. Her life had changed so dramatically in the few months since she'd arrived in Green River that sometimes she hardly recognized herself. The tired, resigned woman who had stepped off the stagecoach was gradually being replaced by someone who laughed more easily, who looked forward to each day, who was beginning to believe in second chances. The night of the harvest dance arrived cool and clear, with a full moon hanging like a silver dollar above the town. The community hall was decorated with autumn leaves and pumpkins, and a small band played on a makeshift stage. Nearly everyone in Green River attended, from the oldest grandparent to the youngest child. Josephine wore her best-dressed dark green silk that she had saved for special occasions, with her hair arranged more carefully than usual. Owen and James called for her at the hotel, both looking handsome in their Sunday best. "You look beautiful," Owen said, his admiration evident in his eyes. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy under his gaze. "You both look very handsome yourselves." James grinned, clearly pleased by the compliment. At 16, he was acutely aware of his appearance, especially with several young ladies his age expected at the dance. The community hall was already crowded when they arrived, the music and laughter spilling out into the night. Martha waved to them from where she was arranging refreshments, and Mayor Bradley nodded approvingly as they passed. "Everyone's watching us," Josephine murmured to Owen. "Let them," he replied, placing his hand lightly at the small of her back. "I'm proud to be seen with you." James soon disappeared to join a group of young people his age, leaving Owen and Josephine to circulate among the adults. Owen introduced her to those she hadn't yet met, his hand never leaving hers, his pride in her company obvious to all. When the band began playing a waltz, Owen turned to her with a questioning look. "Would you dance with me, Josephine?" She hesitated. It had been years since she had danced, and never with Owen. "I'm not sure I remember how. It's like riding a horse," he assured her. "The body remembers even if the mind forgets." He led her onto the floor, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers. As they began to move with the music, Josephine found he was right. Her body remembered the steps, falling naturally into rhythm with his. "See," he said softly. "Some things we never truly forget." They danced in perfect harmony, as if they had been partners for years instead of months. Josephine was aware of glances and smiles from those around them, but found she didn't care. In that moment, there was only the music, the movement, and Owen. "I never expected this," she said as he guided her through a turn. "When I came to Green River, I thought my life was essentially over, that all I had to look forward to was quiet and peace. And now," he asked, his eyes never leaving hers. "Now I'm dancing," she said simply. "And it feels like my life is just beginning again." The music ended, but Owen didn't release her immediately. Instead, he held her gaze for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. "Josephine," he began, his voice low and serious. "I know we agreed to take things slowly, but Cal," James' voice cut through whatever Owen had been about to say. The boy was pushing through the crowd toward them, his face flushed with excitement. "Pa, there's a telegram for you. Mr. Patterson from the telegraph office says it's urgent." Owen frowned, reluctantly releasing Josephine. "Excuse me," he said. "I'd better see what this is about." She watched as he crossed to where the telegraph operator stood by the door, holding a yellow envelope. Owen read the message, his expression changing from concern to something Josephine couldn't quite read. When he returned to her side, his face was carefully neutral. "I need to talk to you," he said. "Somewhere private." Alarm fluttered in her chest. "Is something wrong? Bad news?" "Not here," he said, taking her elbow gently and guiding her outside. The night air was cool after the warmth of the crowded hall. Owen led her to a bench beneath a large oak tree, far enough from the building that their conversation wouldn't be overheard. "Owen, you're scaring me," Josephine said as they sat. "What's happened?" He handed her the telegram. In the moonlight, she could just make out the words. "Army contract awarded, stop 20 horses, required Fort Laramie, stop $3,000, stop, reply soonest, stop. I don't understand," she said, looking up at him. "Is this good news or bad?" "It's good," he said. "Very good." "The Army contract, I've been hoping for, breeding and training cavalry mounts. It's steady work, good pay." He took a deep breath, but it would mean changes. What kind of changes? Josephine asked, still confused by his serious demeanor. I'd need to expand the livery, buy more breeding stock. Hire help, he paused, and I'd need to be away sometimes, delivering horses, meeting with army officials. Josephine felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. I see, so you'd be leaving Green River, not permanently, he clarified quickly. But yes, there would be travel involved. And more work, longer hours, at least at first, she nodded, trying to understand his concern. That sounds like an opportunity, Owen. Why do you seem so worried? He took her hands in his. Because it changes what I was about to ask you inside. Which was, to marry me, he said simply. Josephine felt as if the ground had dropped away beneath her. Marry you, I had it all planned, he admitted with a rueful smile. Ask you at the dance in front of everyone, I even have a ring. He patted his pocket, but this telegram changes things. How? She asked, her heart racing. Because now I have to ask you to marry a man who might be away for weeks at a time, who will be building a business that takes all his energy, who can't promise the quiet life you came to Green River seeking. He looked at her intently. It wouldn't be fair to ask that of you without being honest about what it would mean. Josephine was silent for a long moment, trying to absorb everything he was saying. Marriage, a new business, change again when she had just begun to find her footing. You haven't actually asked me anything yet, she pointed out eventually. Owen blinked, then laughed softly. You're right, I haven't. He shifted on the bench to face her fully and took both her hands in his. Josephine Vance, I love you. I've loved you since the day you arrived in Green River, though I didn't know it then. You've brought light back into my life and James, and I can't imagine my future without you in it. Will you marry me, even knowing that our life together might not be the peaceful one you sought? Tears pricked Josephine's eyes as the words she had never expected to hear again washed over her. Owen, you don't have to answer now, he assured her quickly. Take time to think about it. I know it's a lot to consider. No, she said, squeezing his hands, I don't need time. I came to Green River looking for peace, it's true, but what I found was so much more. She took a deep breath. I found you and James, and a chance to live again, not just exist. She met his gaze steadily. Yes, Owen Calloway, I'll marry you. The joy that transformed his face was like sunrise after the longest night. You're sure, even with the changes, the uncertainty? Life is uncertainty, she said, surprising herself with the certainty she felt. I'm too old to expect guarantees, but I'm not too old to start again with you. Owen reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold ring with a small pearl. It was my mother's, he explained. Not fancy, but it's perfect, Josephine interrupted, feeling tears spill over as he slipped it onto her finger. It fit as if made for her. Owen cupped her face gently and kissed her. A kiss full of promise and a future neither of them had expected but both now embraced. When they returned to the dance, hand in hand, James was the first to notice the ring. His whoop of excitement drew everyone's attention, and soon they were surrounded by well-wishers, Martha among the first to embrace Josephine. Told you, she whispered in Josephine's ear. Didn't I tell you? Yes, you did, Josephine admitted, laughing through her tears. Thank you for bringing me to Green River. Thank you for being brave enough to come, Martha replied, her own eyes suspiciously bright. The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the small church on the edge of town. The entire community turned out for the occasion, the church overflowing with well-wishers. Josephine wore a dress of pale blue silk, not white, which seemed inappropriate for a widow of her age, but not the somber colors she had worn since Daniel's death either. James stood proudly beside his father as best man, while Martha served as Josephine's matron of honor. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, with Josephine and Owen writing their own vows, promises not of youthful passion but of mature love and companionship. I promise to walk beside you, Owen said, his voice steady and clear in the hushed church, through whatever comes for as long as we both shall live. To honor your wisdom, your strength, and your gentle heart, to be your partner in all things, big and small. I promise to trust in our beginning, Josephine replied, her own voice gaining strength as she spoke, to face each day with courage because you are beside me. to share your joys and sorrows, your work and your rest. To remember always that it's never too late to find love if you're brave enough to reach for it. As they spoke their promises, Josephine thought of all the twists and turns that had led her to this moment, the sorrows and disappointments, the brief moment of despair that had nearly kept her from coming to Green River, the courage it had taken to step off that stagecoach. All of it had brought her here to this man, this future, this second chance she had never expected. After the ceremony, the celebration moved to the community hall, transformed with autumn flowers and ribbons. There was music and dancing, food and drink, laughter and a few happy tears. Emily had sent a telegram of congratulations from Denver, promising to visit with her husband and son in the spring, a prospect that filled Josephine with joy. As the afternoon faded toward evening, Josephine found herself standing slightly apart from the festivities, watching Owen dance with Martha, his face alight with happiness. James approached, offering her a cup of punch. "Happy Miss Vance?" he asked, then caught himself. "I mean Mrs. Calloway." The new name still sounded strange to her ears, but not unwelcome. "Very happy, James, and you?" he nodded, his young face serious. "I worried about Pa for a long time. After Ma died, he was just existing, going through the motions, but since you came, he's himself again." He looked at her directly. "Thank you for that." Josephine was touched by his maturity. "Your father gave me the same gift, James, a chance to live again, not just exist." James seemed satisfied with this answer. "So I guess we all saved each other in a way." "I suppose we did," she agreed, watching as Owen concluded his dance with Martha and looked around, clearly searching for his bride. When he spotted her, his face lit up, and he began making his way toward them. "I think I'll go see if Lizzie Miller wants to dance," James said with a smile, slipping away just as Owen reached them. "My wife," Owen said, taking her hand. "Still sounds like a miracle when I say it." "It feels like one," Josephine admitted. "All of this does." He followed her gaze around the room, their friends and neighbors celebrating with them, James awkwardly asking the Miller's daughter to dance, Martha deep in conversation with Mayor Bradley, the future stretching before them like an open road. "Scared?" he asked quietly. "A little," she admitted. "Change always is, I think, but a good kind of scared." "We'll figure it out together," Owen promised, drawing her close. "Day by day." As the music began again, Owen led her onto the dance floor for their final dance before departing for the small house that was now their home. As they moved together in perfect rhythm, Josephine remembered her words on the stagecoach platform months before. "I'm too old to start again," she had thought then, tired and afraid. "We'll start together," Owen had promised on the night of the harvest dance, and so they had. Not with the blind optimism of youth, but with the clear-eyed courage of those who knew both joy and sorrow, who understood the value of the gift they had been given. As the last notes of the music faded, Owen bent to kiss her, a promise for the night to come and all the days after. And Josephine, who had once thought her life essentially over, kissed him back with the certainty that their beginning was just that, a beginning, with all the wonder and possibility the word contained. Years later, Josephine would stand on the porch of their expanded home, watching as Owen taught their young grandson to ride his first pony in the paddock nearby. James and his wife, the former Elizabeth Miller, would be there with their other children, and Emily and her family would be visiting from Denver. The livery would have grown into one of the most respected horse breeding operations in the territory, and Josephine would still be keeping the books, her neat figures tracking their success. But in that moment on the dance floor, all of that was still to come: the challenges and triumphs, the quiet evenings and busy days, the life they would build together. All Josephine knew was that she had found her place and her person, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Calloway?" Owen asked as the music ended. "Yes," Josephine said, taking his hand, "I'm ready." And she was ready for home, ready for tomorrow, ready for the rest of her life with this man who had shown her that it was never too late to begin again, as long as you didn't have to begin alone.